Hello?
Hi, good evening.
Yes, the audio quality is definitely better on your end, at least from
Oh
what I can
yeah.
hear.
So, I'm currently in my wife calls it the cockpit because
Right, okay.
that's from the my father-in-law also has a computer set up where he's got all of his nerdy stuff is in just one place, and so that's why everything's is kind of within arm's reach, and that's the reason why it's called a cockpit. Well, I've got my own as well. So the room that I'm currently in is actually a closet, kind of. It is meant to be a bedroom. Officially, it's a bedroom, but we use it as a very big walk-in closet, which is fantastic. So on one end, I have loads of clothes just hanging, and there's a chest of drawers. On the other end, there's a computer, and it also means that like how studios have the foam stuck to the
Yeah.
walls. It also means that I don't have to bother with that really because the acoustics are very good because the clothes absorb a lot of the sound.
Oh, very nice.
So yeah, it's an unintentional thing. Anyway, I called you 2 minutes, 3 minutes late because I was trying to figure out how to get I have a noise suppression filter ready with OBS for when I stream, and I was trying to get figure out how to get it to work with Audacity, and I just thought I don't have time for this, so I'm actually recording a video on OBS. So I'll somehow figure out how to extract the audio, but the upside is, well, it will be a video with just simply black with a black background. So there's no actual video output. It's just black with our voices. So maybe I'll just share that, and you'll be able to use it.
Yeah, you could just put that as like a private video on YouTube.
Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
obviously it's really easy to download audio from YouTube.
Yeah.
But I might play around and figure out how to get it to work. So anyway, um, it's a lot better than it was. It will be a lot better than it was yesterday anyway.
Yeah. So you know for certain that the it's recording it's recording like audio on both sides and everything.
Yeah. I've literally just readjusted my like a panel on OBS to see my voice, the bar for my voice going up and down and your voice going up and down. So
Oh, very nice.
I've got a visual representation of what's going on.
So have you got your list of potential
Yes,
topics?
yes, I do. So
Ooh.
there aren't actually that many. I thought I wrote down
Right.
more than I actually have. Um, so I thought today I would ask you a question. I'll get to the
Okay.
question in a bit, and I just thought this question will naturally just run its course, and it will spawn lots of sort of side quests, lots of little conversations to stem from that, lots of topics of conversation to stem from that. So I don't think it'll be too much of an issue. But first, wanted to see how you were, what's new, how's Level Up Plan 3 coming along?
Level up on 3. I haven't worked on it for a few days now. I'm sort of I tend to be a bit like scatterbrained with it sometimes. Like I'll focus on a thing and then I'll just start to get bored of that. Then I'll like nudge over to like another thing. Like if I'm not working on the music, for example, but say if like I might make like a track and it's like I can't bother making any more music. So then I just won't for a while and then I'll go to designing something else. And I'll sort of like jump back and forth. But I am really happy with how it's coming along. I mean, just it's still just the design stage. And I am trying to figure out that thing I mentioned about how to prevent you from looking through walls. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'd really like to. I don't know how I'm going to make it work. But just as I'm just getting on with my life, I'm keep thinking of like little things, like little parts of the script in the story, because there's going to be more story this time round. And I just get like little like bursts of excitement, like ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that. So yeah, it's still got a long ways off, but I'm very happy with it.
And it's like a consistent state of excitement. So you just feel energized by the by even the thought of working on it. Does that give you energy?
It does, I've actually found like when I maybe because I started getting back into it recently. Well, what happened was when I got into that mindset, when I'd like leave work on my way home, I just think to myself, "Ooh, level up plan 3." I just get like that burst of excitement, and I just get more like generally motivated.
Uh-huh.
It's really good.
Yeah. I can see for my all of my creative projects, I have bursts of motivation, and then I let my mind run away with me, basically run away with the ideas and start thinking of crazy, sort of huge plans that they're brilliant. I think they're fantastic ideas. I think they would work very well. Um, but then I kind of forget that I don't have I don't have the ability or the time or the patience or the work ethic to get those things done. And so that's something I've had to learn recently, which is to be excited by smaller accomplishments.
I found that if I'm in the mood, if I'm thinking to myself like I'd like to try to make a different type of game, and I have had those thoughts, it's never happened where I'll get like little bits where I'm thinking I'd like to try making a platform game, and I would, and I'm thinking about these other like I'd also like to try and make an idle game, and I would, but what happens is I keep thinking of ideas, and then I'm thinking like the platform game idea, for example. I think to myself, oh yeah, I can also do this other thing, and then I can do this other thing, and I keep stacking these ideas up. But when it comes to like level up land, it's like I'm allowed to do that because it all makes sense. But when I'm thinking about like a platform game or something much smaller scale, it seems to overtake me a bit.
Hmm. See, uh, I just remembered a conversation I had with some guy from the Czech Republic a few years back who wanted, who I was playtesting his one of his maps for Counter-Strike. So Counter-Strike is a crazy popular shooting game. But the sad thing about Counter-Strike is while it gives you all the tools to be super creative and create really fantastic levels, admittedly on a fairly outdated game map development tool, let's call it, especially compared to Unreal Engine. Um, Even though you can make these fantastic things, everyone just plays the same three maps day in, day out, every single day, and it's not as though you can reach you can reach basically anybody. It's a really horrible way to describe it, but my motivation for designing for that game was very limited. And I just recall telling this Czech guy uh, about the level that I was designing way before I tested his level. So I designed a level and it was based in a gallery. And it was a standard bomb defuse scenario. I mean, terrorists were trying to destroy the gallery for some reason. I don't know. They didn't like the artwork, or I don't know, some kind of stupid reason. The artwork
Yeah.
was too bad or something. I don't know. They were just art fascists. Either way, the terrorists were there to destroy the artwork, and the police were there to stop them in a kind of incessant game of Tom and Jerry. In any case, I designed the rough layout, and the way it works in Counter-Strike, or the way it works in first-person shooter games, really, is you begin by doing a kind of a really rough draft, and then you play on it, and then you play on it some more, and then you keep playing on the rough draft until the rough draft is perfect, and then you start adding details. Well, I made a rough draft. I played it. I played it quite a lot. I got one of my brothers to play it, and yeah, we all decided it was a really fun map to play. And then I started, instead of refining it and taking it a step further and testing it with like 20 people as opposed to just 3 or 4, with sorry, not 20, with 10 people on at the same time. That's the game size. I just started adding bits and bobs. So like I would stay on one area and I think, oh, I can make myself a nice gate here. So I would spend 5 days making one gate, and I think, oh, that's a very nice gate. But why is this gate here? I mean, I don't need a gate here. So then I just deleted it and worked on something else. I actually designed, I think, the nicest set of stairs in the entire Counter-Strike universe. And I was so proud of this set of stairs. I actually copied and pasted it, so my work wasn't just that I spent 10 minutes on, I'm sorry, it wasn't just that I spent 10 days on one area of the map. I was able to copy and paste that area of the map to 2 other areas of the map. So I had 3 amazing sets of stairs, and I was so proud of them. But once I reached a point where I thought, okay, this is looking really good, and I wanted to test it, and then I wanted to test it with more people. When I loaded it up with bots just to play against the computer, I just realized how abysmal it was as an actual level, how navigation was poor. People would get snagged on even the stupidest things, and it just overwhelmed me, and I stopped. And that map is actually available to download on the Steam Workshop, but it's just what you wouldn't want to.
I mean, that's a real thing. You know, you can put so much time and effort into a thing, and then it just doesn't work,
Yeah.
and you're just stuck. It's like, how do I solve this? And it can really be demotivating.
Yes.
So, should we get to the topic?
So the topic at hand is what makes a good game? It's quite a difficult question, I think.
Oh,
What
yeah,
makes
quite open-ended as well.
Yeah.
I was worried that you were going to ask something, and my answer would just be, I don't know,
Yeah.
and
Well, no, I
then
think
that
you
would
have
be it.
plenty. I think you'd have plenty to say. You've played at least 500 games.
Yes.
I have played at least 100, I think, in my life. So I think you're more qualified to answer this question. But at the end of the day, it's based on opinions. So I'm curious. I'm curious as to what your answer will be.
I think it's a
Okay,
very
so let
open
me
question.
let me narrow it down.
Okay.
Um, if I remember correctly, your favorite game is Rainbow Moon, or is it something along those lines?
No, no, it's Azure Dreams.
Azure Dreams, but it's kind of, is it the same series? I don't know if I've no,
No,
I'm
no.
mixing things up. Oh, my apologies. In any case, so your favorite game is Azure Dreams. What makes Azure Dreams a good game? Oh, am I
I
doing a bad job at this?
No, no, you're not. It's just I just think to myself, oh, I've got to suddenly like think about Azure Dreams. And of course I could start off actually, just I suppose this is related to the question rather than just being a direct answer to the question.
Uh-huh.
But one experience I've had with Azure Dreams is that I did get it when I was young, maybe around 10 or 11, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So like late 90s, but I wouldn't have called it my favorite game, or even, well, at the time I would have called it one of my favorites, probably. That was just before I discovered Final Fantasy VIII, and that very quickly became my favorite game as soon as I discovered that. But Azure Dreams, I didn't consider it my favorite game until maybe like a decade later. And what ended up happening was between that time, I think it was about like 2007 or so, I started to play it more and think, you know what, this actually might be my favorite game. But even since then, and even in the last few years or so, I've had instances where I've gone online and someone said like, "Oh, by the way, did you know that you can do this?" And I'm like, "Can you?" And then I'd go and try it out. It's like, "Oh wow, I didn't know you could do that." And things like I'm not going to go into all the rules
Uh-huh.
and how everything works in Azure Dreams, but one of the things that I learned was someone had said online, did you know that if you get a magic ball to level 10 and you give it to one of your familiars, that familiar will learn the spell on that magic ball? And I didn't know that. I didn't have a clue. So I actually went and tested it out, and I found out it was true. So I had this new method of teaching like
Mm-hmm.
familiars different spells that I was completely ignorant about for like a couple of decades.
Wow. So would you say that it's a game that is so the game has to have depth. If a game was very superficial on the surface, there's not much for you to do, not much for you to discover, just to play. I would describe maybe a game like Call of Duty to be quite um you play it, and then once you finished it, there's not really much for you to rediscover as far as gameplay is concerned. You just go do this, and then you're done really. So I can relate to that story with, or take Final Fantasy VIII for example. Not so much with the gameplay. I think when I was a kid, I didn't understand Junction at all. Later on, I did, and that gave me a lot of replay value. But for Final Fantasy VIII, it was a lot about the story. So I went back and I didn't realize certain things. I didn't realize certain themes. I mean, after I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, which became my favorite film, I didn't realize just how inspired it was, how the space section was inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey. So, would you say that this depth is very important?
Uh, See, I do, but then I think to myself also, I also would say that like Crash Bandicoot is a good game, but
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't say that that's got depth,
Mm-hmm.
really.
Okay.
I mean, I, I suppose it's strange because I think in some regards you can find depth in unconventional ways,
Mm-hmm.
unconventional
Yeah.
ways. Um, because sometimes you think about like just the rules, like oh, you can jump on enemies, you can spin enemies. If you smash all the boxes in a level, you get a gem. But sometimes there's little things like along the way that you'll find, and then you'll think, oh yeah, this means this thing and this means that thing. And sometimes those things can be hard to pinpoint. And I do think sometimes people can be a bit over reliant on those things, but I still think you can't deny that those types of things exist, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'm trying
I,
to follow.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I wasn't too sure if I was
so
making my quite
okay,
clear.
so you like so a game doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of depth, but as long as what the game has to offer can be discovered in an organic way. Is that what you were hinting at?
I suppose so. I
S-
mean, I can think of things that games do that I've seen games do where I think to myself like, oh, it's doing this thing again, and it's just like, um, it just becomes so stale and standard, and it's like it's just so uninteresting. Like you'll have all these, like one thing that I've always found really annoying is when like a game's secrets are basically just the fact that it's hard to see on the screen. Like maybe
Oh,
it's behind. Yeah.
I just
Ah,
remembered Lara Croft Go.
yeah. Yes. I was. Yeah, that just come to mind just then. Yeah, it used to be scouring the screen and be like, "Oh, that's a secret," but I didn't even see anything, and I still can't see what what it was.
I like how in Lara Croft Go, like a gameplay feature turned out to be just moving your analog stick so your cursor goes across the whole screen to figure out where it kind of wobbles a bit, because that's where you can get the what's the word I'm looking for? Because
The secrets.
that's where the secret gem is hidden, because you can't
Yeah,
see it otherwise, because you can't do the same thing that you could do on a touch device, and that's move it around or change the perspective a bit. Just bizarre.
yeah. Well, just in general, like you'll have like adventure games or whatever where you're running down a path, and there'll be like a little artifact hidden behind a rock, and I just think that's not interesting.
Hmm. Well, I found one of my favorite games, maybe not one of my favorite games, but I really enjoyed Uncharted. I think I spoke about it yesterday. That was one of the games that I bought for PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
Uncharted 1, I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I think the most important thing for me was the setting, and I actually played it in German. I put the audio and the subtitles to German because I was learning German at the time, and I thought that would be a very, very smart thing to do for some reason. And I just remember going to my German teacher and I read what I I regurgitated something that I'd seen in Uncharted, like a sentence. It wasn't like a rude sentence or anything, but because I'd mispronounced it completely, she just said, "That's not German. What are you talking about?" And I just thought, well, what's the point of me learning German if Uncharted German doesn't make sense? Anyway, in Uncharted, you can collect little gems. And I thought the gems were nice. So you pick them up and you can look at them in your collection. So you can like move the camera around and it just shows you a 3D model. But only later, when I went back to it, when I went back to Uncharted, I realized that if you collect all the gems, you get what's the word I'm looking for? You get like cheats for the game. So, for example, you can start the level with this kind of gun as opposed to the default. With the default might be a bad gun, so you get to start with a good one. So that kind of thing.
Right. So what do you think makes a good game then?
Oh, see, I think I am a slave to nostalgia. Nostalgia, incidentally, is a topic for another video. I thought for another not video
Right.
for another call. Um, so I'm a slave to nostalgia, and I generally find nostalgia has the biggest impact. So something I played as a kid is always going to be better than something I play now. And that's not saying I'm not saying that the game is better, but I just enjoy it more. So I really enjoy going back and playing games that I've already played before, as opposed to trying new ones. So, for example, unintentionally, I tried Cyberpunk 2077. I mean, I didn't try Cyberpunk unintentionally. I intentionally installed Cyberpunk 2077. And while I was playing it, I unintentionally just got this nostalgia for Borderlands 2. And I just thought, I fancy playing Borderlands 2, you know? So I just stopped playing Cyberpunk, installed Borderlands 2, and played that instead. Because, well, firstly, it's a better game. And secondly, I had all the nostalgia attached to it. I think, yeah.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay, so I think nostalgia is important, but that's such a cheap way to just move out of the firing line of this question. So I think it has to be accessible. I think that's one of the most important things. So I think on all levels, basically. So I think the gameplay is probably the easiest way to describe this, because all games require gameplay. That's my opinion, anyway. So the gameplay has to be accessible, and this could be a criticism of LOL 1, actually, Level Up Land 1. Basically, my brother is really into Dark Souls. Okay, he wasn't really into Dark Souls. He bought Dark Souls 3 and he loved it, and so he bought Dark Souls 3 for me. But I'm just dreadful at that game. And I think I would really enjoy the story, maybe not so much, but I think I'd really, really enjoy the setting if that game wasn't so difficult. If that game didn't require you to memorize a whole load of stuff. If it wasn't such a chore to play. And I admit that I'm just bad and that I should just get better. I think that's what people generally say in this kind of situation. But that's the kind of problem I have with it. And so if it was more accessible, then I could enjoy all the other things about it. About Dark Souls. So I can enjoy the visual style. I can enjoy I could enjoy the music. I could enjoy the setting. What do you think of that?
I do think that I generally think when people say like, "Oh, you should just get better at the game" or whatever, I'm thinking you're not really making your game sound better by saying to other people they just need to be better at the game. But I think it's so tempting to fall into that trap where it's like, "Oh, you don't understand why this thing works like this. It's done this because of this." So I don't know.
Yeah. So uh, I think there is something to it. There is something to making challenging games because that is part of the fun, and also it's exhilarating. So my brother was telling me how in Dark Souls 3 he was stuck on one boss for weeks, and every day when he returned from work he'd play for like half an hour to an hour, and he'd just be trying this one boss over and over again. And he was frustrated, he was sweaty because he was just so eager to defeat this boss. And then after a few weeks he finally defeated it, and he had such a rush of emotion, such a rush of just contentment, if that's even possible, that he finally defeated this boss. That he said it was worth it. It was worth all the pain, all the times that he said he hated it and he didn't want to play this game anymore. It was worth it because when he finally defeated it, he knew he'd accomplished something. I can't relate to that at all.
I do think that like this whole idea of like difficulty and challenge and all that, I think it comes in different forms. And sometimes people can complain about something, but what they're actually complaining about is the form of challenge that it is. Whereas what I find is that there's certain types of challenge that people will praise, but I won't. So one thing, and I always like to make a point of this, is that people will complain about things like, oh, when you die in this game, you get sent back quite far. Now, in I don't mind that at all. Of course, I think the game has to be good and accommodate for that. Um, but we have had sort of this trend where the individual challenges are harder, but the punishments are smaller. So, and the example I always use is Super Meat Boy, because that game, the levels are very small and you'll die loads of times against the different like saws and everything. And but when you do die, you get sent back to the start of the level, and it loads up in less than a second. So people praise that, saying, well, you don't get sent back so far, you haven't lost out on a lot. But in my experience, the fact that I don't get sent back that far is balanced against the fact that you die so often. And so if I'm playing one level 100 times, every jump that you do as part of that, like say if the first jump in the level is easy, it's like, yeah, I'm not replaying that much, but I'm replaying the same thing 100 times. And I get so bored if I have no means to take a step back and think, right, how am I going to do this differently? Is there something else I can do to accommodate for this difficulty? Is there anything else I can do to help me out? And in situations like that, the answer is no. And people just say, oh, well, you can just keep trying. If you fail, you could try straight away. You don't have to play through however many minutes of content to get back to where you were. But, and then like this goes back to Azure Dreams, for example. When you die in Azure Dreams, you lose all the items that you have with you. You can reload before you go back into the tower, but if you do that, then you'll lose the levels if you're familiar. So it's sort of like a pick your punishment type of thing. But I love that. I love the idea that I could be 20 minutes into a run or half an hour into a run, and I need to decide, do I use a wind crystal to get out of here so that I can just keep what I've got, or do I try to get that thing that's like over in the next room, but I could die getting it? It's part of I suppose you could relate this to Level Up Land 1 with like the warp spell, and it's, do I keep going or do I head back to the pier? I love that stuff.
There's an element of danger, and you've got to plan. You've got to think. Yeah, there's got to be forethought. So when you're going back to the Super Meat Boy point, there's not really a chance for you to plan. There's not really a chance for you to take a step back and think, because immediately, if the problem is a jump and you can't make a jump, and you repeat this jump, let's say you can repeat this jump within half a second, the chances of you actually between the jumps consider doing something else as opposed to just trying to do what you were attempting to do in the first place is kind of slim, because you just keep going and going and going, and before you know it, you've tried the jump 100 times, each time exactly the same way, and you should have done it a completely different way.
Yeah, so I love things like a lot of the things that people complain about, like limited save points, or that was the only example I could think of, but
Well,
that type of thing.
limited save points for me when I was younger were dreadful. I hated them because, for example, I'd be playing Final Fantasy. I won't say Final Fantasy 8 because I know that game inside out, but let's say I'm playing Final Fantasy 6 for the first time. Okay, maybe not Final Fantasy 6, I can't really picture it much. So Final Fantasy 7, easy one. I don't really know Final Fantasy 7 all that well. I know the story, but I'm not particularly good at it. Not particularly good at it as far as the gameplay is concerned. And I just remember playing it for a while, and then I lose. One of the hardest fights for me, I think, was when you fight against the guy's name begins with a D. It's Barrett's friend from when he was a kid.
Dine.
Dine. I thought it was Dine. The fight against Dine, I remember I lost that, and I hadn't saved in ages, and I lost a whole load of progress, and I just got really angry. I stopped playing, and I just didn't play Final Fantasy VII for about a week or 2 weeks, and then I went back to it and carried on and continued. But
But you know,
that's the kind of attitude I had when I was a kid.
so has your attitude changed now, do you think?
Yes. Oh dear, yes. Recently, I say recently, so last month and the month before that. So in January and in December, I was playing Skyrim. So I downloaded a whole load of mods that I hadn't tried before. These were all gameplay and visual mods. Now Skyrim, I don't know how much you've played Sky. You probably haven't played Skyrim on the PC at all, have you?
Not on the PC,
So
no. I haven't played it much in
Skyrim on the
general, but
PC is just mod install simulator. That's basically what it is.
yeah.
You just try so many. You have to get it stable, get it to work, and then if it does work, you can finally play the game. But by that point, you think, oh, I might do some I might add some new mods, or you might just not feel like playing at all. But anyway, getting to the point. In Skyrim, you can save whenever you want. So I would, before I go into like a Nordic ruin or something in Skyrim, I would just say I would obviously it auto saves, doesn't it? So I wouldn't. There is no sense of fear at all. I would just I go in and I have my sword and my shield and I think I'm gonna batter this guy, and then it turns out that I get wiped out by what are they called? The Draugr something or other. The guys who can do the shouts. Anyway, Deathlord, Draugr Deathlord. So I get floored by a Draugr Deathlord, and then I think, okay, so I don't really lose any progress because I only lost maybe, I don't know, 2 minutes. And the 2 minutes, because it's easy, there's no kind of, how can I describe this? There's not much difficulty until I get to the boss or to the Draugr Deathlord, and then just before I get to it, I know that he's difficult, so I just whack a quick save down. And then so I start fighting him. I land a few shots, and I realize that I can do it. I can maybe I land two shots before he does something, so I land those two shots, quick save, and then I can try reloading and try to dodge his attack by reloading all the time. And then
Yeah.
once I've dodged his attack, I quick save again. I hit him a few times like a fly, and then then he kills me again. So then I know that I've got a quick save again at that point, and that's the way I kind of hobble to the finish line in Skyrim, and it's pathetic. And that's something I would never like. Mule streams his Skyrim, gaming Mule streams Skyrim every now and again, or he used to. That's something I could never do because I just think I'm such a pitiful Skyrim player that I would just be eaten alive by anyone who wanted to watch.
I mean, I think I suppose we could sort of talk about like game design principles
Hmm.
and, just maybe not like, oh, what makes a game good, but talk about certain rules that sort of it makes sense to abide by those certain principles.
Okay.
But, it still allows enough room to be creative with stuff. And I think, you know, being able to save before uncertain large events is a big flaw because, like you were saying, like with your example of Skyrim, I remember, I think it was like Shinobi on the Mega Drive Classics on the PS3, and I was trying to get all the trophies, and it was just like, save after every jump. Oh, an enemy comes out, attacks me. Oh, better load. And then I attack the enemy, and they're like, oh, I hit them, so I'll save. So you're
Hmm.
just constantly opening up the menu. I mean, even if it is just like a type of button to like quick save and quick load and everything, you're just undoing like every single little thing. Like an example. Okay, he's probably an example that you'll probably be more familiar with than I am. But and I might need you to explain to me if there's any sort of justification or if there's any sort of balancing factor to this.
Okay.
But I think it's in the Forza games, you can rewind.
Oh, I was thinking I'd like to say this.
Yes.
So that was introduced. I think the first game that I saw that rewind factor, I might be wrong, it might have been earlier, was in a Codemasters game. So Codemasters made I think they made Toka Race Driver. That was the PS2 era. And then I bought Grid. The first time I saw it was with Race Driver Grid, which was I think 2008 for the PlayStation 3. And in Race Driver Grid, if you crash, you can rewind. So let's say you start a level. If you play on normal difficulty, the difficulty is split into various things. So you can do driver aids. So for example, traction control to stop your wheels from spinning when you start off the line. So you don't have without traction control, you can just hold down the accelerator on full and the car will actually move as opposed to just spinning up a cloud of smoke. And also there's braking control so that it will help you brake before corners or things like that. But another part of the difficulty that you can also set independently is this rewind feature. And the rewind feature is it's bonkers. I mean, on normal difficulty you can rewind 6 times or 5 times during a race. Let's say a race is 5 laps, which means if you crash or if you take a corner very slow and someone overtakes you, you can rewind and you go back and then you can try again and get it right the second time round. It's good that there's a limit, I think. It was only on like the arcade mode where you just simply play against the computer, not in a career mode or not online. No, not online, it wouldn't work anyway. But in the career mode, you can't do it as many times as you want. But on the arcade mode, you can. Yeah, I hated it. I disabled it, or I just upped the difficulty so I wouldn't have to do it. And it's kind of like save states, a little bit, like a limited amount of save states. So imagine playing Pokemon. Imagine you're playing Pokemon Red, and how in Pokemon Red every single move has a 1 in 255 chance of missing. And then so you play through the entirety of Pokemon Red with just your, let's say, Squirtle at level 5, or not training him at all, not catching any other Pokemon for the most part, obviously, ignoring HMs. But the point is, you go into every single fight with your save state ready. You do a quick save because you're counting on that roll of the dice, 1 in 255 chance of missing. So you want the opponent to miss so that you can do your attack, and you just keep doing your save state that way. That's like an extreme example of it. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, those types of games aren't, when things have a chance to them like that, it's designed to be a chance so that when you choose what attack you're going to do, you're basing it off that particular thing. I saw a video, I think it's called Silo Hawk, I'm not so sure, where he had a video about like save states and all that. And one of the examples they used was, well, he said there was 2 different examples that he used to describe 2 different things, the 2 different effects that save states had. One of them was Pokemon, where he was saying you've got these attacks that do a one-hit KO, but they've got a very low accuracy.
Yes.
And with save states, it's basically just changes the percentage of everything to 100.
Yep.
So, you're unlikely to hit but massively powerful attacks suddenly become just massively powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And the other example I used was in, I think it was Donkey Kong Country, saying that if you use save states and the live system becomes obsolete, then that changes your approach to the different items around the game. Because suddenly things that are like, say you've got like a life in an area where you can see it, but it's a bit of a challenge to get to, part of the game is deciding, should I try and get it? But if you've got the save states, that's no longer part of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think when I was younger, when I had my first laptop, my own laptop, I had an emulator on there, and I think I played Super Mario. And I just remember something I did in my naivety. So I would have been 14, I think, or 15, 15 maybe. In my naivety or just my kind of idiocy, uh, I played Super Mario, but at the end of each level, you know, when you jump on Super Mario Brothers 3, you jump to collect either a star, a flower, or a mushroom. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar.
Yeah, so you get like a reward at the end of it, and you if you match the three, so if you get 3 stars after completing 3 levels, you get a reward or something. Whereas if it's a star, and a mushroom, you get nothing. Well, I just remember save stating for that because I thought, well, why am I gonna mess around with this when I could just get the reward, have my cake and eat it too? So I used save states to do it, and then I remember by the time I was on like World 5, I had like I don't know 50 lives, and it was just it was kind of idiotic because I didn't really deserve them. I wasn't a fantastic player. I was just simply save stating.
Yeah, but then why would you need lives if you can save state?
Exactly. That's the thing. That's why I had so many.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's uh uh well what other things do you find okay, let me you mentioned Forza. I would like to bring up a peeve of mine. So
Okay.
from one perspective, I think Forza is a very, very good game. Talking specifically Forza Horizon 5, that's the latest one. From one point of view, it's a fantastic game. From another point of view, it's the one of the worst games I've ever played. So I remember that GTA 3 guy. So he's from Mule's Discord. He's part of the community there. He was playing it one day, and I thought, oh, I'd give it a go. So I downloaded it because it was on Microsoft Game Pass, and that was available for £1 trial. So no, it was free for a month, and then it was £1 for a month, I think, and then it was I think £6 per month. So I gave it a go. I installed Forza Horizon 5. It took 10 years to install because it's like 200 gigabytes. I may be exaggerating. Um, and you start off with this absolute bonkers intro. The graphics are absolutely incredible. I mean, I've got a very powerful computer from 2015. So by today's standards, it's kind of run of the mill. It's not the best. It's not the worst. And it ran it okay, but it looked absolutely incredible. This game, the I would say the graphics were the by far the best thing about it. So each car looks absolutely fantastic. The environments look fantastic. It's set in Mexico and it's very lush and bright and vibrant. Um, and you start off, you're racing a really, really fast car. I mean, ignore the fact that you're racing a supercar over muddy terrain and it's not just absolutely disintegrated. Uh, we'll gloss over that. But you enjoy all of this kind of visual dessert, as it were, but there is nothing substantial about it. The very first race I actually did in the career mode, so I had to set up my character and I went to do the first race. Sorry, I had to choose a car or something. So this is going to be the second race. So this is after you've completed the prologue. You get to choose one of 3 cars to drive. Not you keep all of them, of course, because everything's given to you. That's the point I'm getting at. Going to get to eventually. Uh, I did the first race on my own without the hand holding, and at the end, I was racing against 2 people on motorbikes, and then I was losing the entire time. And at the end of the race, there was a big stunt where the 2 people on motorbikes ditched their motorbikes and they started going down. They jumped off a cliff and they were in wingsuits and parachutes. And I lost this race miserably. I came last, but the game just said, "You came last. You came third. Good job. Here's the reward anyway." And that just really, really infuriated me. I wanted to restart because I felt I took some corners that were quite bad. I would like to restart the race. I would accept my punishment humbly, or I would like to move on and do something else. I didn't want the reward. Basically, that's kind of how my brain was working at that point, and it really, really annoyed me. So from one side, the game looks fantastic. It's got plenty of content, lots of things to do in it, but there is no challenge, I feel. The reward mechanics are just too friendly.
And is that the same reward as what you would have got if you did better?
I don't know, to be honest, because I gave up.
It was just a
But
case
but
of
I don't. But the thing is, I think the reward was you get a car for winning. That was what I think what you were given. That was the option before you started the race. They said you'll do this race and you'll win this. Okay, so I did the race. I came last and I got it anyway. So that made no sense to me.
yeah. I think I tell you what, right, and I suppose this sort of blends into that. One thing I always find, again, talking about like core principles and all that, one thing I always find is I think information should be clear. Maybe that's not the right word, but I don't like this idea of games just straight up lying to you. Such as one example I've heard of, and this was treated like it was an amazing thing. And, maybe it did accomplish the things that they were going for. I've heard stories about games. I think Assassin's Creed was the example of this, where the amount of health that you have as displayed on the screen is actually just a lie. And
Okay.
what they do is they make it so that the last like icon of health or the end of your health actually represents more than what it is, so that you feel the adrenaline of, ooh, I'm so close to death, ooh,
Uh-huh.
I'm you know, and maybe that works. But when I hear something about that, I think that's cheating. You don't get to make a good game by just pretending that it's a game that's better than it is. Do you know?
It's as though the developers know what the levers are. They don't. They know what the switches are that they have to press in order to make the player feel exhilarated or feel happy or satisfied, and
Yeah.
they just kind of they're short circuiting it, basically.
Yes. And I mean, to me, I'm not going to say it's a sign of a bad game, but it just makes me think less of a game. I
Uh-huh.
think, no, you should deserve your quality. I want to act. uh, If I'm going to feel like I've scraped by and I've come up the other end and I've got this reward and I've only just earned it, I want it to be genuine.
Hmm. But isn't there also the danger that you just assume, okay, I'm down on one health now. I mean, that means I can take three more hits as opposed to just one more hit because of the way this thing works? Or do you just think it's that the only reason you know about that is because of someone diving into the code and figuring it out, or doing testing, basically, or testing it essentially? So would the average player have known that?
I don't think so.
Hmm. Well, then I think that's even worse.
I think it's a case of they expect people to not really think about like, oh, the amount of hits. They just think, oh, I'm close to death. I better avoid things. I better be good. I think
Uh-huh.
that's as far as it goes, really.
What other design principles do you think there should be? So they really shouldn't lie to the player. Your your character in the game, the communication, let's say, between the game and the player should be quite clear. So obviously that means the controls have to be good, so they don't, so you don't, when you come across an enemy, the enemy shouldn't just switch your spells around. And and when, okay, that's harsh. And and when, yeah, the game shouldn't lie about how much health you've got. But are there any other things that you would do? So say, for example, I would love to eventually make my own game. And I imagine it would be a role-playing game, so like an old school. Imagine Final Fantasy One, probably worse. That's probably what I'd do. What kind of recommendations would you give me working on a role-playing game myself? What makes a good game? What makes a what? Okay, that's a not not the way I wanted to describe it. What should I do? What shouldn't I do when
You mean
planning?
like in designing an RPG?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I could speak to my experience with Level Upland. Although I do want to just touch upon something um about like information being clear and all that.
Okay.
Something like with Level Up Land 1, the way I designed it in my mind is that if anything is from the perspective of the player, from the character, the information is all laid out. But from the perspective of the enemy, it's hidden, it's secret.
Mm-hmm.
So when like when you're like in the menu and you see strike does this much damage, and everything's very clear cut. It gives you like the exact details as to what the spell does. So nothing's hidden there. But the way the enemies attack and the way the enemies behave, that's for you to figure out because it's in an entity that's different from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, and this is again a principle that I've sort of considered when it comes to designing all the Level Up Land games, is that generally speaking, you should design things in such a way that they can be balanced, so that if something, like if a mechanic sort of runs away from you, it's hard to think of the words to describe what I'm trying to think of, but design things in such a way that if the mechanics send a game down a route that you weren't expecting, there's still enough, or there's still something there that can require some sort of thought or some sort of strategy, I suppose. So again, I'm going to use the example of Level Up Land 1 here. So you take spells, like the damaging spells. Most of them have their own like calculations as to how much it works and everything. Now, the fact that you acquire spells in quantities and the fact that you cast them and you can run out of them, that means that even if the balancing of the spells individually, there's something off about it, I can at least depend on the fact that you get them in quantities, and you can use this spell X many times because you have that many. I can always fall back on that to provide some level of balancing, where even if something is an outright better spell than another spell, there's still that thought of, oh, but I only have so many of them. So it helps to create enough of these little things where even if they don't need to be balanced in a certain way, you can at least depend on the fact that they can be. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it does. So one of the ways you can take this and apply it to RPGs more broadly, not just Level Up Land, is, well, okay, so that would work for like acquiring new spells. But even if there is something that, okay, how can I put this? This is actually this is where my limit my limited experience with video games, despite having played video games all my life, basically. Well, if there is a spell that is very overpowered, let's say, or in a shooting game, a weapon is very overpowered, well, then you don't allow the player to use it all the time. So, in a shooting game, for example, you'd give it very limited ammunition. So this is usually in the case of a bazooka, a rocket launcher. There are rocket launchers in many shooting games, but you only usually get one shot, or you get two shots for a whole level. And if you use them straight away on like a normal stormtrooper, and then all of a sudden there's a big spaceship that you need to destroy, and you've run out of rocket launchers, well, then you're scuppered, and you gotta think better next time, let's say. Well, in a role-playing game, perhaps I'm trying to think of an example. Actually, probably can't. But I think the shooting game example is good enough. So you create something that's really fantastic, loads of fun, but you're saying to leave yourself room to limit how easy it is to exploit, or give the player a chance to use their own mind as opposed to just click X to win.
Yes, I would say so. I would say that a lot of the time when it comes to, and this is something, I mean, I suppose you could apply this to other types of games as well, but like you were saying, like with a rocket launcher, the limitation that you have is based on your ammunition. I think when it comes to certain things in RPGs, the thing that you want to limit, like the downsides, you look at the most powerful things or the most effective things, like the ultimate big attacking spells or whatever it is in the game. The things that you want to balance them against are things that would be a detriment to you at, say, a lower level or like an earlier point in the game. And one big example, and this is one of those things where I've seen it and I'm thinking, I really like the way that they've done that. Because in Final Fantasy VII, the ultimate weapons, they're all really powerful. They've all got their own like rules as to determine how much damage they do based on different factors. And once you get them, they are just the most powerful weapons to use. But the downside to them is that the materia that's in them doesn't level up at all. It doesn't gain any
Yeah.
AP. So that sort of balancing
Their
like your
usefulness.
the long-term growth of your materia versus the strength of the weapon.
Hmm.
So what you do to optimize that is you use the weapons when you don't need to level up materia. So it's like something that you hold off from using
Yes.
until you can get its full potential without the downsides.
Yeah, it's a fantastic example. Yeah. I remember back when I started modding, not back when this is in the middle of modding Delta Force, Black Hawk Down from 2003. I remember I downloaded somebody's mod and I was just playing the game as it was. And he added a suppressed pistol, like a pistol with a silencer or a suppressor, and it just made it very quiet and you wouldn't alert enemies, or at least that was the theory. And it was quite accurate. But the way he designed it in his mod, he was it's a guy called Baldo or Baldo, fantastic modder, really. And his attention to detail is fantastic. The way he designed this pistol, this suppressed pistol, to work is that you can't fire it quickly. There's a delay between your shots. So if you could think of in terms of Borderlands 2, imagine a repeater that, or just any weapon that does a lot of there's very accurate. Let's say we'll use accuracy as an example. It's very accurate. You can get you can shoot you can get the weak spots or the head or whatever, or the eye for the robots. But the problem is it fires very slowly. Well, I think a sensible person would consider this a mechanic and they wouldn't change this. But I remember back when I first started modding, I thought I actually did this. I went into his mod, into his game files, and I removed the limiter to the slow kind of firing of the pistol, and I sent him a message saying, "Oh, I'm playing your mod. It's fantastic, but I just changed this one thing because I thought it was better if you can fire actually as fast as you wanted." And he replied with perhaps one of the most fantastic replies I've ever heard, and that was something, or one of the fantastic things I've ever read, which was, sometimes it's good not to have a suppressed pistol that fires 2,000 rocket launcher ammo per minute with unlimited ammunition. Sometimes it's good to have a challenge. And that just really just put me in my place, and I have remembered it to this day.
Yeah, because if the joy comes in recognizing the differences between these different like options, then that's going to be completely removed when one of them's clearly just the best.
Mm-hmm.
I
So,
suppose
yeah, continue.
I'll just say, I suppose one of the core design principles, and this isn't so much a case of something within the game itself, rather than just something to consider going forward when you're designing different things, because some things can be hard to balance because there's either so many factors going on or there's so many little things that it depends on that you can't really be sure if something is too powerful or too weak, or like just how you want to get it just right. I think generally speaking, you it's best to have things being underpowered than overpowered, because if it's overpowered, then it becomes the obvious choice over everything else. But if it's underpowered, it becomes obviously not the choice, but you still have the choice to make between the other things.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's fairly correct. Yeah, so in shooting games, it's actually really, really. I'll take the subject of Counter, or I'll talk about Counter Strike again. So Counter Strike is a game that's got multiple weapons that you can choose, and in the olden days, everyone would basically only use four weapons. They would use one of the pistols because it was the best pistol. They would use two of the normal rifles because they are the best on either team. So the teams could only buy one for their side. So that the terrorists had the AK, and the counter terrorists had the Colt or the M4. And then they both had this. Everyone bought the same sniper rifle. Or they had, I think, at least triple the amount of weapons apart from these four. But everyone only chose those four because they were overpowered, or just simply because they were the most efficient way to play the game. Whereas in the latest one, the developer tries to make everything everything viable to the point that there are some things which are actually not that viable. They're not that useful, but at the same time, there isn't. I don't think there is a single weapon that is just absolutely incredible in all situations that you should always just go for that weapon and not anything else. So in that regard, that's kind of followed. They followed that principle.
I also think there's a balancing act between, um, like ideally, you would like things to be balanced. You'd like a lot of like choices of weapon or whatever it is to be balanced against each other. But I also think that taking it to its extreme, you can end up with everything just being the same, so that the
Hmm.
choice doesn't really matter.
So I think that's actually, uh, if your game is um, if your game is very flat, or it's very superficial. There's only one real level to it, and there's not much to do. Okay, I would like to compare three games now. So one, Delta Force, the one I'm most familiar with from my childhood. I played hours of it, I modded it, I made maps for it. Call of Duty and Counter-Strike. So I'm talking purely about weapons. So what weapon should I use in the game? In Delta Force, all the weapons are available to you at all times. You just have to, the only kind of limiting factor is what class you choose. If you want to be able to revive other people, which is a really important mechanic, to revive your teammates after they've been shot, you only have a choice of three, and one of those weapons is actually the best one in the game that everyone uses, so there isn't really that much to consider. In Call of Duty, the weapon you choose is based on how long you've played the game for, because you gain experience by playing the game, not necessarily being good, but just by playing the game you get experience, and you with that experience you unlock weapons, and so by the end you have a choice of anything. Whereas in Counter Strike you have within one match, so within one sort of one lot of 30 rounds, you have to earn money. And you earn money by completing rounds, by surviving, by completing objectives, or by eliminating the other team. And you've got to decide what to do with that money, where you invest it. Do you buy yourself some armor to protect you from other shots, from other players' shots? Or do you buy yourself the most expensive weapon? And in the case of Delta Force, um, everything is available. There is no punishment for choosing any weapon. Everyone in that kind of system, the answer is always just choose the best weapon. So the gameplay is very, very superficial. There's not much to influence your choice. In Call of Duty, you're just limited by how long you've played the game for. So that's kind of that's added, let's say, a feature. But in Counter Strike, it's added. Well, the economy. It's famous. It's a famous aspect of Counter Strike, and it's copied by other games. And it's like you were saying about the spell, or about or about the weapons, the ultimate weapons in Final Fantasy VII. So they themselves are fantastically powerful. For example, I don't know, let's say Inferno is a really, really good spell in Level Up Land 1, but there's only one place you can get it. So you've limited it by using other aspects of the gameplay. And I think that could be a way to a way to describe, at least from in my experience, shooting games. What makes a good shooting game is, well, if you have multiple levels to the gameplay, not just the rooty tooty point and shooty.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I was also thinking, as since I've gone through a couple of these principles, I think another principle that I have, generally speaking, is that the more powerful something is, the more complicated it should be.
Okay,
So, what do you think
interesting.
of that?
Uh, the first thing that comes to mind is I wouldn't agree.
All
As in,
right, okay.
so the first thing, the more powerful something is, the more complicated. So if it has, let's say the raw damage output is the best, but it also damages your player. So for example, if you some Pokemon moves like Slam or something else, a headbutt, for example, is a powerful move in Pokemon, but you have to lower your head first. So you have to. It's kind of like Bide, where you have to wait a turn before it actually hits. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Well, I don't necessarily mean um, most powerful as in, just does the most
Yeah, yeah.
damage. But I suppose what I mean is the things that are simple and easy to use,
Shouldn't be
they
powerful.
should.
Shouldn't be
Yeah, well, they
as
shouldn't. They
potent.
shouldn't. Yeah, they shouldn't be as potent because um, anybody can use them. But I think if you've got something that's complicated, got a bit more depth to it, then those who are more effective at figuring that out should be rewarded with something more powerful as a result.
So I think a good example of this is Twist and Recover in Level Up Land 1.
Yeah.
So I recall when playing Level Up Land 1, I'd be really angry with myself if I missed the best opportunity to use Recover and I didn't use it to its full potential.
Yeah, I definitely think. I mean, I know Level Band One's a very common example we've used for these things, but I think um, a really good example in Level Up Land One for a few things that I've mentioned today. First of all, in terms of the complexity versus its power, and also with regards to something else that we talked about that quite get, I can't quite pinpoint at the moment. But I've always felt like enhance is like the big example. Yeah, enhance. It's it's one of the best spells in the game, but it's also the most complicated. Well, one of the most complicated spells in the game. But also, it's one of those things where the balance is something that affects you long term, but it won't help you out of a sticky situation.
Yes, I
So,
see that.
so you can get enhances early if you're lucky enough. You can go to that cave, find a sentinel, and get an enhance and run away. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it. But because you're still early in the game, having one enhance, it's like the complexity. Yeah, the complexity there is a mix of like, well, I've got this early. Do I use it now and have 501 shield for a long, long time, or do I just not and
Yeah,
have however much more later down the line?
yep. That's a very good example. And it's part of the learning experience as well. So I'm sure there are so many times when I was playing Level Up Land 1, while I was playing your game, that you must have just uh, I imagine either just face palming because what I'm doing is idiotic. Like what was I doing near the beginning? Farming repairs because I thought they were going to be really important, and then later on I just found out what a waste of time that was.
That did confuse me. Yeah, I was thinking, what are you farming repairs for?
Yeah. Well, that's just it. I didn't quite understand how. Um, so repairs, I think restore 200 of your shield.
100 shield?
100 shield they restore. See, I
Yeah.
think at that early stage, my health was just so minimal, or it didn't seem. I think actually I know. I thought that maybe there were enemies that could only attack that would. And this is kind of true. There were enemies that would attack your shield, um, at a fairly slow pace, but then might completely rinse through your normal health. And that was the scout, was it not? No, the scout was the other way around. The scout was
Yeah.
the other way around. So anyway, I thought that it was going to be something along those lines, and I didn't realize that at that point that the shield could be increased. And so I thought the shield was always at 500, so a repair repairs it by 1/5. So that's actually quite decent. So if I had loads of these, then if I come across an enemy that is sort of stumped by the shield and I can keep repairing and attacking, then maybe that will help. And that was just the kind of mental gymnastics that I had to do in order to get to that point and think
Yeah.
that farming at that stage was a good idea. I have to admit, though,
Yeah.
it was difficult at the beginning because the sheer amount of times that you die, that you have to experience failure before you get powerful enough that you can just sort of brush off certain enemies.
Yeah, it's very much Level Up Land 1 is very much a learning experience. It's a case of, experiencing the enemies and experiencing the spells and just gradually getting a bit more powerful and seeing a bit more as
Winding
you go.
background to my comment about my brother playing Dark Souls 3 and being stuck on some witch or some she priest or something for weeks, sorry. Can you remember how many times I was taken out by an eagle at the beginning, and then just the satisfaction of being able to waltz past them, and they wouldn't even take off like 10% of my shield, or they wouldn't even take off 5% of my shield, and then I had that poor one that I extracted 1,000 strikes from, or 900 odd strikes.
It's yeah.
That was a real sense of accomplishment. So that was unlike Final Fantasy VIII, unlike Final Fantasy not unlike Final Fantasy VIII or unlike Skyrim or Oblivion. So those are some of my favorite games. Level Up Land 1, I got the sense that I was now like a boss and I could do whatever I wanted on that small island. And
I remember
that was so satisfying.
the big standout moment to me was when you first discovered the wizard and you defeated it, and then that was you just discovered a bunch of spells
Yeah.
like warp, copy, siphon, and joker, I think.
Uh-huh.
And you killed it, and you got like a bunch of experience, and then you walked back to the pier, and it was like you, it was like so much power had just come your way
Yeah.
because
Like absorbing a dragon soul.
yeah, yeah, it's just because you have the context there to know that. And I know this sounds like I'm just bigging up my own game here, but you also have to remember that I designed this game in like based on my own principles.
Hmm.
So naturally, I'm going to think that like my design is good for that reason alone, really. But and you compare that to like your experience with, was it Forza Horizon, where you
Yes.
came last and it gave you the reward.
Yes. Oh
Like,
dear.
yeah, and when that happens and you don't have the context for what that means, it sort of loses its value.
See, I think I know the reason for this though. So I would definitely describe in this case, this mechanic. So let's ignore the what makes a good game. What makes a good game mechanic even? Uh, this kind of sense of accomplishment, the danger and the learning, the thinking involved, they're all fantastic. And a good example of this is like you just said in Level Up Plan, you have a few examples of spells, enhance being one of them, and this experience of getting spells and coming across a difficult enemy and then making it out of making out alive and warping back to the port or walking back to the pier. In Forza Horizon, everything is just dolloped into your lap. You've Everything is a celebration. A loss is a celebration. Crashing into a wall, which should make you lose the race, is a celebration. I remember playing Need for Speed Underground or playing Gran Turismo 1. Is it Gran Turismo 1? Gran Turismo 1 for the PlayStation 1. And the AI would be rubber banded so that if you're really, really fast and you have a really good car or you have a better car than they still catch up to you and they still pose a challenge. I don't think it's good. That kind of crosses into the territory of cheating, the computer's cheating against you. But there is challenge, and I think that's what's lacking in Forza Horizon 5, and that's why I think um, the way it dishes out rewards is just all wrong. But I think I know the reason, and the reason is it's for kids. I'm a teacher by profession. That's what I do. I teach English, and my there are quite a few of my students play Forza Horizon 5, and they absolutely adore it. And these are kids that are I don't know, they're going to be 9, 10, 11 years old, and they think it's the best game ever. And that's just it. I can't imagine knowing those kids, knowing their, let's say, personalities, knowing what they're like. I can't imagine they do well in Level Up Land 1. Ignoring the fact that the graphics are two-dimensional and not, done by a ridiculous studio of really, really talented artists. Uh, really talented artists just doing one car for like months on end. But they just wouldn't be able to handle leaving the pier and getting hit by an eagle and not being able to continue.
I find it strange in a way that, and I've heard this about like other things as well, saying it's for kids, da 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 da. And I think to myself, like, what the games I played when I was a kid, and I'm thinking, I don't now. Obviously, the range of games that exist is different, and perhaps if I was a kid and there were these games that did what Forza does, maybe I'd really like them more. I don't know. I can only speak retrospectively. But when I think of the games I really liked when I was young, it, I still, I still took every victory according to my memory. Of course, memories can be wrong, but according to my memory, I still took like every victory just as it came, because you say that not you in particular, but just people will say that all these old retro games, they were frustratingly difficult, and if you ran out of lives, you had to start the whole game again, and sometimes you had to be very precise and everything. But I didn't grow up with the expectation that I would complete games. I sort of just played them to see how far I could get, and if ever I got further than what I did last time, I took it as a victory. Now this is going back to like the Mega Drive days and all that, but still, I just remember thinking, "Ooh, I've never been this far before," and so I still thought of it all as contextual. Maybe if I did have a game that like Forza that does all that, maybe I'd think differently. I don't know.
Okay, I've got another question.
Okay.
This question I think I know the answer to, but I'll ask it anyway. Well, I know what your answer is going to be, and everyone's answer is going to be different, which is fine. How would you
Right.
balance the value or the quality of a game? How would you balance um how can I put this? I haven't actually prepared this. This is just something I came up with just now. Anyway, so if a game is made up of audio, it's made so music and sound effects, it's made up of visual, so this is sort of the art style, the graphics, the fidelity, how well it runs, so the frame rate and things like that. as well as the gameplay. So that includes the controls, mechanics, and things like that. How would you, what is the ratio of importance? So would you say it's like one to, if, is it one to one to one? So they're all equally important, or is one thing more important than the other? So taking Forza Horizon, for example, I think graphically it's absolutely outstanding. Um, but from a gameplay perspective, I don't think it's actually that fantastic. The driving isn't so fun, in my opinion. Admittedly, I didn't give it much of a chance because I found the gameplay, apart from the driving, not to be interesting, not to be appealing. But if I was to describe it one to one to one, the audio was fine, the visuals were fantastic, but the gameplay I didn't like, so it wouldn't actually rank too high on my list. But somebody who really, really, for whom visuals matter a lot, they would obviously consider Forza Horizon a masterpiece. Say. So where do you stand on this? What do you think is more important, and how would you divide these?
Well, the thing is, I don't really think, and I suppose this is just a cop-out answer, but I don't really think you could put numbers on it because I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of it sort of, some of it like informs the other parts. Like, they say you could have a game which is just a bunch of squares and text, like Level Up Land 1, right? Which is, I know the go-to example that everything we've gone through here, but people say, oh, you could just like have everything just like cubes and text and everything just like blocky colors. And another time I think, well, you could, but sometimes I think that if you've got, music and graphics and all that, then that helps solidify certain elements. So, you know, um, if you've got, tense music for when there's a tense situation and all that, it triggers moments in your brain to like associate things. And I think this is part of the reason um, as to why I like listening to game soundtracks. And I
Hmm.
also find that recently, like the Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack, I don't listen to it the whole way through because it's like 4 hours. But I mean, I have done in the past a few times. But what I do is sometimes I will just put it on and listen to it. And when I do, that's when I'm in my design mode. And because I'm working on Level Up Land 3, I'm in my design mode a lot these days. So when I'm out and about, I'll put the Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack on. My brain is doing some sort of calculation that's converting the sound to the idea of a game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so your brain associates certain pieces of music, would you say? Associates certain pieces of music to, well, for me, it attaches them to memories. I'm a very nostalgic person, but for you, it attaches it to, let's say, working out mechanics, so that you kind of, it's easier for you to get into the mindset of doing this.
Yeah, well, it does attach itself to memories as well, especially as you know, Fear.
Uh-huh.
That tune in particular gives me very strong memories of that time I borrowed disc one and I couldn't leave Balham Garden because it crashed.
Macro reactor for me.
Yes. Did you have the same situation where you were borrowing it or like
Yeah.
the game crashed?
Well, sorry,
Yeah.
borrowing it. It was my brother's. It was my brother's copy, my older brother's copy, and they'd stopped playing it because obviously it had broken, and they could only get as far as the Scorpion boss at the beginning. And so I played it loads. I wasn't particularly good at the game, so I don't think I could have defeated the Scorpion boss on my own, probably. Admittedly, this would have been maybe the year 2000 or so. So I would have been 7 years old, or maybe even earlier. And so what I just did is I got to the point where I was inside the macro reactor, and I would just walk around and try to explore the limited area that there was, and all the while listening to it. So now, when I hear the macro reactor soundtrack, it sends shivers down my spine.
Yeah. See, Final Fantasy VIII for me, that that memory of being stuck in Balham Garden, it was just the training area and playing cards. That was all that I did because it was pretty much all that I could do.
Yeah.
And I mean, my friend let me borrow it, and he was borrowing Azure Dreams from me. And so RPG wise, all I was really familiar with was Azure Dreams and Pokemon, and very briefly Final Fantasy VIII because he showed me it. Um, he showed me the Balam Garden Nog sequence, and he
Uh-huh.
showed me the boss against Jumbo Cactuar.
So disc 2, 3, and 4 worked fine, just disc 1 didn't work, and he gave that disc to you. And obviously you'd
Yeah,
have to start on disc 1, so that's a
yeah,
tough life.
but it just didn't let you leave Balam Garden. So, but I was really into it when I first saw it. I was like, I had this because I was only familiar with like Azure Dreams and Pokemon, where you caught your own monsters and all that. What happened was I remember seeing things like during the Nog sequence, like he'd card an enemy, and I'd think, oh, you card an enemy, that means you have them as a GF now.
Yeah.
That was just what I was thinking. And I just remember seeing like, he'd go into the menus and everything. And I remember when I fought Jumbo Cactuar, just seeing, because he kept summoning Leviathan and just seeing like all like things in the menu and all that. I remember thinking like, oh, this menu's so big, there's so many things going on here. And then when I borrowed it, I was just obsessed with like looking at all the GF abilities and trying to figure out how everything works just in the training center. So Fear, that music in the training area, that music to me is just associated with the general discovery of
Hmm.
of like what RPGs can be.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think we answered the question what makes a good game, but there was a lot of things to think about, I reckon. I
I
think
think
this when it comes to discovery, I I'm quite passive when I play video games, I think. Playing Level Up Land is the most thinking I think I ever do when I play video games. I am definitely not somebody who plays for gameplay, really. So Skyrim for me is a visual sort of storytelling experience. It's not I don't min max in in Skyrim. I really couldn't care less. Same goes for Oblivion.
I think you've just reminded me of something that I wanted to get to.
Uh-huh.
Um, because I said about how I don't like it, or I would say it's a general like a principle of mine is don't have like a save point or something like that where like just before this like a big turn of event like you were saying with Skyrim, the way that you basically like saved and loaded between every attack so that you could have the perfect fight. I think another example of something similar to that, and I suppose this could be a more controversial thing, but this is just my general experience, especially with like Elder Scrolls style games, is when you are presented with big gameplay altering options that you are set into before you have any context whatsoever. So, I mean, something like Borderlands, for example, you start the game and you choose a character. Now, the way that Borderlands is set up is that, you can start the game with a different character and you can carry over some of your badass rank. And, so it's all like tied together. And the idea is that you will, or maybe you will, play through like a few different like save files. But I've never liked it when you have a game and it starts up and it's like choose your class,
Uh-huh.
because I think I don't know what any of this means. Any choice I make or any choice that someone would make would be based off general ideas like, oh, I like being sneaky. But in my mind, I'm thinking I have to know, I have to be in a situation where I can think to myself, I need more sneaking ability, and then decide based off that and not feel like I'm forever locked into my decision. If it was a case of, say, if it was a case of you start the game as like a blank slate character, and early on, it's like you're given a magic gem, and with this magic gem, you can choose one set of abilities to specialize in, and then later down the line, you can find more magic gems to unlock the other specializations. Then that, in my mind, that's a strategic choice. It's like, right, okay, I'm sort of deciding now so that I know what I'm going to get a head start in, so I can like plan ahead from there. But if it's a case of you start the game, you choose your stats, you choose your class, to me, that's not really a decision because I don't know what I'm deciding. At the end of the day, I think that the best thing for me to do would be to just like go online and,
Find
you know,
out.
yeah, and just find out. But then that's not going to work because people are going to argue about it, which is good, generally speaking. If you have a game with all these different options and people are arguing about what's the best option, that's a good sign. But I think when it comes to this sort of situation where you're just starting a game and you just become so overwhelmed, like I must make the correct decision now, I don't like that.
I'd like to finish. I really need to finish soon. I'd
Okay.
like to finish by shedding my experience on what you just said about not knowing what you're doing at the beginning. The very first time I played Oblivion, it was on PlayStation 3. I bought it for a friend as a birthday present, and he enjoyed it. He played it, and then he lent it to me after he was done. After he got bored of it, I think. And so I had it on the PlayStation, and I was playing actually with one of my brothers, and we built a character. We were just mesmerized by the character creation because it was hilarious. Anyone who's played Oblivion can attest to that. So we built ourselves a Khajiit character, and when we left the sewers, we went exploring. We didn't. I don't think we immediately went into the dungeon on the opposite side of the lake, but we just went around exploring, and we really enjoyed using the bow and arrow. So the best archers are the wood elves, right? And had I
I'm
known,
not I'm not too sure.
so well, the best archers for in Skyrim, I think, are the wood elves. I'm not sure if the Khajiit are actually that bad, but the Khajiit are supposed to be good at sneaking, pickpocketing, and I think hand to hand combat. I think. Well, we had our Khajiit. We really enjoyed the bow and arrow, the archery mechanics, and so we spent the first, let's say, half an hour just using the bow and arrow, thinking that we're amazing. We got into a fight with a guard, and we were dealing such a pitiful amount of damage against him that he was running around with about 20 arrows sticking out of his head. And stop! You've broken the law, and we just had no idea what we were doing. I mean, Oblivion tries to do a lot of hand holding at the beginning, but they really don't prepare you. They explain things fairly well. I mean, it's explained sort of black on white, black on white, yeah, black and white. Anyway, it's uh, it's not until you actually get into the world and figure out what you enjoy doing in the game that that decision would make sense.
I remember my brother once said, because he tried Oblivion. I've played it somewhat, but he tried it and he was saying like he was he was in a town and he picked some flowers and the guard like stopped him, and then no matter where he'd go like in the world, this one guard was like running straight to was just running straight towards him, and he was saying like, they say that this game you can do anything you want, but you just get stopped if you do anything.
Oh, Oblivion is fantastic. I think the Elder Scrolls games are brilliant, but the only way I could possibly play them, I wouldn't be able to play on a console because I just run into so many issues. Like, for example, in that situation, I mean, what if you've saved and you don't no longer have an older save where this
Yeah.
where this guard isn't chasing you and you've become a criminal and you don't have money, you have to go to jail. I don't know.
I mean, my main memory of Oblivion is sticking an elastic band around the analog sticks and then maxing out my athletics.
Yeah. Well, with Oblivion, I've completed it twice, I think, or three times. So the first time I completed it, I didn't really know what I was doing with leveling up. I didn't know that there was a way to level up. I didn't know that when you sleep, you level up, and if you haven't done the right kind of leveling up, you're just hindering yourself.
Yeah, it's very messy.
And so I recall leveling up only as soon as it said, "Oh, you can level up now." So I just went and leveled up because I didn't really quite know how it worked, and I ended up with a character who was pitifully weak, didn't have any skills outside of combat. Sorry, didn't have any skills in combat or outside of combat. Just was really fast and really acrobatic. And I remember being stalked by. I had a game save where pretty early on, so maybe I wasn't so fast. There was a mountain lion. I saved the game when I was standing on top of a rock, and there was a mountain lion at the bottom of the rock, and he was just looking at me. And if I jumped down, he killed me. And this is kind of almost like a soft lock. Of course, I could have opened the console and just delete and just removed the mountain lion, but of course that would kind of defeat the point. So at that stage, it was definitely a hindrance that I didn't know how the leveling up worked. But later on, it turns out when I had to close all the Oblivion gates to finish the story mode, I actually was able to close them in blistering speed because my character was so fast. I could just jump around people. I didn't have to fight anyone. I just ran straight past them, got the sigil key to close the Oblivion gate, and that was that. Of course, I wasn't playing the game properly as it's intended, but
I think Oblivion is sort of fascinating in the same way that Final Fantasy VIII is, in that the rules are weird and you can do a lot of research into them. Um, but if you don't know what you're doing, yeah, it can be pretty harsh on you.
yes, absolutely. Right, well, I think I've got to finish here. Thanks very much. This was very, very entertaining. I don't know if this format of answering a question is going to be any good because I'm no good at actually being brutal and pinning you down to an answer. And I
It's all
think I
right.
think the conversation just goes naturally. So maybe I shouldn't start with such a broad question, maybe something specific, and then just let the conversation go from there.
Yeah, well, I think it's been fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably like a specific, like you're saying you're gonna, like one time you've got something planned about like nostalgia or something. Yeah, that works.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much, and I'll speak to you soon.
Right. Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.